Optimizing autism, what it means and doesn't mean. You can look it up for yourself. This is the website. Very good article. If we are going to optimize autism in our society, that is, to make autism work as well as possible, we have to destroy something. What we have to destroy is not autism, but the overwhelmingly negative, judgmental, unscientific definition of what it means to be autistic. Nobody would want to optimize a bad thing, unless they are filled with mischief and malice. We have to destroy the definition of autism, which is communicated by most of the major, well-funded autism organizations throughout the world. We have to replace this definition with a balanced representation of autism that recognizes what it actually feels like to be autistic and how autism can work in favor of a person and of society. Unfortunately, many autistic people themselves and their families accept the damning definitions of autistic identity unquestioningly, because they are issued by learned people in positions of authority, published in hardcover manuals and distributed via mass media as part of awareness campaigns. As a result, many autistic people suffer from what is known as internalized oppression. They believe only bad things about their autism. They see themselves as inferior. And because they do indeed have some of the struggles described in these definitions, they do not realize that many of their finest qualities are also manifestations of autism. And so, paradoxically, they sometimes support the very campaigns, autism walks, blue t-shirts, pitiful lists of the suffering caused by autism, which damn them in the eyes of the world as miserable wretches, and which create prejudice against them. They never realize their own autistic strengths or become aware of their potential for optimization. Ironically, the pathologizing definition of autism often also works against efforts to ensure that autistic people are healthier and better supported. People are told that autism is a lifelong developmental disorder. The autism industry is full of psychiatrists and therapists who make a living from this damned for life subset of the population. In spite of all the amazing medical studies on autism, few people are actually putting the findings to use to make life better for autistic people. The answer is fairly simple, but it takes a bit of explaining. The formal definitions of autism are all negative. Hence, genuine physical problems are lumped together with social judgments of autistic people's differences under a single derisive medicalized definition of autism. Traditionally, biomedical interventions aim to heal the body and thereby also to get rid of the differences between autistic people and average people. It's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Why would you do that? Keep the baby. There are a lot of benefits for everybody if we all work together. See the whole picture. When we talk about optimizing something, it's always in the context of some kind of system. A system is a union of interdependent parts, and optimization is about making all the parts work together better to serve the aims of the system. So, optimizing autism means making autism work better. This does not just apply to what we do inside our bodies. In fact, optimizing autism is not just about autistic people. Autistic people share a world with other people and other animals. So, optimizing one system does not go without involving other systems. Optimizing autism includes helping other people to interact more effectively with autistic people, as they all work together towards a common goal. The common goal may be, for example, an environmental goal, a social goal, or a work goal. Optimizing autism in the workplace could involve employing autistic people for specific things which they can do better than other people can do, and adapting the environment to help them do their work effectively. Optimizing autism in civic society may include getting autistic people's unusual perspectives on how systems could be changed to make the world a better place for all creatures. In all of this, the idea is to use autistic traits to their best potential. Optimizing autism in society is not about one-size-fits-all approaches, such as employing autistics only to be product testers without ascertaining whether they have the required aptitude or interest. Autistic people can be very different from one another. Some have very varied interests. One person has an exceptional intellect but be mute. Another may speak fluently but find it impossible to keep her space organized. Some may be brilliant at art but be unable to manage money. So one person's area of strength may be another person's area of weakness. The principle is not very different from optimizing non-autistic people in society.
Does or doesn't work for them. Because as I was looking around at the research that was being done about autists and about autism, there was a whole lot of stuff that was being done by neurotypical individuals and by researchers looking at the technical aspects of autism. But it wasn't incorporating the actual lived experience of being on the autism spectrum, especially for something that so fundamentally affects at a social level and is incredibly subjective. You need to have somebody who's got the lived experience in order to get good data.
We are also recognizing that some aspects of autism can be disabling in certain situations. This disablement is sometimes because of health issues within an autistic person's body, and sometimes because the environment, including the social environment, is not well suited to accommodating and integrating the autistic person. It can also be a combination of these factors. Most autistic people have a very narrow band of optimal operability. In other words, some autistic people are like a rare species of fish which lives in harmony with its environment in a single pond in a distant canyon. If the fish are moved to a different pond, where the temperature, pressure, pH, and electrolyte content of the water, the number of hours of light per day are slightly different from the first pond, a place where they cannot feed on the unique mosquito larvae which grow in their original pond, then they lose their scales and sink to the bottom.
Strategies work best. And the flip side of that is that after you listen to that long enough, you start to develop patterns that you can then turn around and share. The confidence that comes with being able to say, this is who I am. If we've got a problem, I will, of course, take input from other people who have other experiences, but at the end of the day, it's my choice.
Optimizing autism is also about personal choice. For example, a certain autistic person who suffers from sensory overload may try to do all he or she can to reduce this sensitivity by wearing earplugs, taking electrolytes, changing his or her diet, and ensuring that he or she receives just the right amount of exposure to sensory inputs. He or she may do this not only because he or she wants to overcome the discomfort, but also because he or she wants to be able to interact more with other people. So, it is an absolute misconception of autism that this equals being anti-social. At least for me, that's not true. Online, I am very, very social. And this is just my way of interacting. And I also love to interact one-on-one with other people. And if they are like-minded, it is very nourishing. And you can have very deep conversations about things. So, you need to know yourself and your body, what it reacts to. For this reason, many autistic people need to be very particular about what they eat and about how and where they live and interact with others. There may be some common trends in the talents of autistic people and commonalities in the medical problems experienced by autistic people, but every person is different. And there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all autism diet or an ideal autistic lifestyle. There are, however, numerous directives in this regard that could work well for whole clusters of autistics. And one of them, I think, is beneficial for everybody, autistic or non-autistic, but autistics in particular, which is avoid the intake of excitotoxins.
Excitotoxicity is a process where the glutamate neurotransmission receptors are being overstimulated, and it produces a process of gradual destruction of the synaptic connections and the dendrites. Now, this was originally discovered by Dr. Lucas and Newhouse, who are ophthalmology researchers. And they thought that glutamate would enhance the health of the retina because glutamate was a fuel for the brain and neurons. But what they found is when they fed this glutamate to mice, it destroyed all the retinal cells along the inner layer of the retina. 10 years later, Dr. John Olney, a neuroscientist, repeated this and found out that it also destroyed some very important areas of the brain. At that time, we didn't even know there was such a thing as a glutamate receptor in the brain. Glutamate was not known or accepted as a neurotransmitter. Since that time, we've discovered that, in fact, it is not only a neurotransmitter, but is the most common and one of the most important. 90% of all transmission in the cortex of the brain is by glutamate. 50% of all neurotransmission in the brain is by glutamate, which puts it far ahead of things like serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine. And we also find that the glutamate receptors are playing a major role in control of the other receptors as well. So what we're going to talk about is some of the things that excitotoxicity is associated with clinically. And as you see on this slide, it's associated with a great number of clinical disorders. Beginning early in life, it has a major role to play in neurodegenerative disorders. That is development of the brain, abnormal development of the brain, things like Alzheimer's, all the way up into Down syndrome, lissencephaly, some of the major abnormalities of brain development. Then we see that there's the common things that most of us are aware of, like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, ALS, Huntington's disease. What we find in all these neurodegenerative diseases, the common denominator is an elevation in excitotoxicity in the brain. What I've learned since then is that, in fact, in all of these disorders, there's an immune component that's very important, and that's what we're going to talk about. But also, there's glutamate receptors throughout the entire body, not just in the brain and spinal cord. You have glutamate receptors in the lungs, in the endothelial lining of blood vessels, in all major organs, reproductive organs, the pancreas, the beta cells. Every organ in the body has glutamate receptors. So we see it's connected with sudden cardiac death. That is, when these glutamate receptors are overstimulated, particularly in the face of low magnesium, you'll develop sudden cardiac death. GI disorders, lupus, autoimmune disorders that affect the brain and the nervous system, they're activating these immune and glutamate receptors, producing destruction of the nervous system. Multiple sclerosis. Atherosclerosis is playing a major role because it produces very high level inflammation in the wall of the blood vessel chronically, high free radical generation, lipid peroxidation. Retinal disorders, like now we know that glaucoma, the blindness is not caused by the pressure, it's caused by excitotoxicity, in particular immunoexcitotoxicity in the retina itself. Endocrine disorders, diabetes, and we found that, in fact, it's also associated with tumor growth.
For autistics in particular, it is even more important to avoid excitotoxins. Unfortunately, many people still have a very uneducated idea about autism. Traditional practitioners believe that autism is a mystery. They may say that we have little knowledge of possible causes and that treatment should address impairments in the processing of touch, movement, audition, and vision, speech, language, and behavior. And this is just so backwards. It's not the right approach. Accompanying physical issues such as allergies, breathing problems, gastrointestinal issues, and others are unrelated to the diagnosis. Yeah. Another way to think about autism. Autism spectrum disability is a multisystem developmental disability caused by an accumulation of environmental stressors turning on a genetically susceptible predisposition to the condition, just like a bridge that collapses when a heavily laden truck crosses it, the body collapses. Depending upon the triggers, different systems are affected in each individual related to his or her bio-individuality. And that's why they now have started to talk about autisms in the plural. Yeah, so the best first step is cut out all the excitotoxins from your diet. When I follow a diet that suits me, I sleep better, am less anxious, recover from socializing quicker, and feel more comfortable in my own body. Many of my clients had already developed other fantastic strategies over the years for managing their health and well-being. We are a resourceful lot. And yet, in my overflowing ring binder of research papers on autistic health and well-being issues, not one is focused on how we self-manage our own physiological and psychological challenges. How can it be that nobody is asking us what works for us? In 2018, I decided to go back to university to do a research master's to find out how to carry out academic research so that I can add my own autistic voice to the conversation. For my research study, I wanted to explore how other late-diagnosed autistic women manage their own health and well-being, particularly in terms of nutrition and movement strategies undertaken without professional guidance. Autistics, autodidacts, and autonomy. Analysis of the data generated 4 main themes exploring 1. Understanding needs, 2. Individual health practices, 3. Individual environments, and 4. Creativity and stimming. Whilst the findings may be of use to all autistic people and their supporters, all the women had an interest in health and well-being, so we must be wary of applying the findings to autistic women or other groups. Theme 1. Understanding needs. An identification of autism enabled the participants to more effectively tailor how they supported their own health and well-being. An identification of autism led to greater understanding about challenges common for many autistic people, such as 1. Fatigue and overload, 2. Anxiety, burnout, and sleep problems, and 3. Digestive problems and pain. An identification also enabled peer support from other autistic people, mostly online. This was beneficial in terms of 1. Discussing and sharing information sources, and 2. Increased self-respect and decreased self-blame for exhaustion, stress, and not being able to keep up, and 3. Understanding that a problematic environment was often linked to the physical and mental health problems they were managing. Individual health practices. Participants preferred to learn about practices themselves rather than relying on recommendations, advice from professional sources. This way, they could understand how and why something might work and whether it would work for their own needs. All participants demonstrated a strong interest in self-education, tending towards immersive learning through books, medical journals, websites, and podcasts. Participants reported using their pattern-finding abilities to make connections between different health theories, making for novel and deep understandings. Exactly. Most reported that in developing structured dietary practices such as identifying and removing foods to which they were sensitive to, and basing meals around unprocessed foods that do not contain excitotoxins, to address challenges such as digestive issues and/or chronic pain. They had noted improvements in sleep quality, energy, focus, and coordination, and reductions in sensory challenges, anxiety, and agitation. Some also researched and used herbs and supplements to support their mental health and hormones. Most participants practiced a combination of martial arts, yoga, walking, or strength training, mostly alone. Benefits of these practices included reducing anxiety, improving coordination and mobility, pain relief, increased confidence, improved sleep, and avoiding burnout. Individual environments. Everyone described how they needed regular time when they had control over their own environment through spending time alone, following routines, or being in nature. Yeah, nature is the best nervous system regulator. Time alone spent reading, creativity, meditating, napping, or just being. So not running around doing, but just be in the moment. And this you can combine with nature. You go for a walk, and you can also just sit down somewhere in the forest. Take in the environment. Oxygenate your system and be. And this helps from recover from the stresses of socializing and generated resilience for future socializing. It also enabled the participants to create and maintain self-created routines, not imposed routines, okay? I don't know what people think, that they believe they have to impose routines. That's stressful because it doesn't suit your needs more often than not. And we are more than capable to create our own routines. And then it improves feeling calm and in control. This is not about controlling others. This is about autonomy, being sovereign, the sense of agency, and the sense of safety. It's about that. So again, places in nature used frequently to escape difficult social and sensory environments. And difficult social, why? Because of the invalidation, the humanizing, ridiculing, non-acceptance. Because everything that is different is being judged. Just let each other live. Live and let live. That would reduce overall stress. And of course, if you're stressed and you feel exhausted, then you're tired from all that. And if you can reduce the stress, then you feel, of course, calm and you are more productive. Therefore, home environments were very important. Some said that control over their home made them feel less disabled. Options ranged from living somewhere remote, arranging things in a personal way, having established household routines, and creating a pleasant sensory environment. Creativity and stimming were used to reduce feelings of being overwhelmed by other people or by sensory sensitivities, as well as for encouraging and magnifying positive moods. Words used by participants included grounding, relaxing, focusing, and resetting. For me, it also helps to put me in the zone. From there, it can bring in very interesting ideas. The zone is the birthplace of creativity. For that, you need to be in a relaxed state, not in a stressed state. Many participants talked about helpful strategies in terms of creative practices like painting, writing, dancing, and playing an instrument, and projects that needed creative thinking, such as computer coding, interior design, and building and planning social projects. And my theory of the stimming is actually that it will help us to be in the zone because it's calming, reduces stress, getting rid of energy. So in nature, animals actually shake when they are stressed, and therefore they don't get traumatized. They shake it out of the system. There is a very good polar bear YouTube video, and you can see how this works. It looks almost like a seizure, but then this is just shaking out the stress and preventing from getting traumatized. And if you are ridiculed and judged for using such stimming practices, this is really coming from a very uneducated place. So nobody should be shamed for using stimming practices. It is helpful to cope with an environment that is not suited for autistic sensitivity. Many autistic people, myself included, find that conventional health and well-being advice isn't always helpful for us. More often, we need very different strategies. As individuals, we need to discover our own strategies. There is no one-size-fits-all. We can learn ways to feel happier and healthier from being taught by someone else, but researching, developing, and practicing strategies for ourselves is sometimes more effective. This way we can feel for ourselves what works and what doesn't. Some of us find relief through unconventional diet or movement practices. Some of us need to be in nature a lot. Some of us thrive with regular time away from other people, and some of us see measurable benefits from fully immersing ourselves in something we find really interesting.